Good morning, everyone. Happy Hump Day to you. We are at the middle of the week, and Hump Days are the best days ever. Today is Wednesday, not Tuesday, Wednesday, June 10th, 2020. And today we are going to be discussing how to convert fractions, decimals, and percentages, okay? Now, on top of the higher level math stuff that I enjoy, like quadratic formula and slope, I really enjoy those. When it comes to the easier side of things, I definitely love converting fractions, decimals, and percentages. This is one of my favorite things to teach, as I love to convert different things. And this is going to be an easy lesson. It just takes a lot of ingenuity, understanding how it works, and making sure that, again, you apply what you need to know where you need to put it at. Okay, so it's not about always, it's always about how to do certain things, but make sure that you are applying it in the right place. Okay, so we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, I'm going to put my toolbar up here. Hey, toolbar. All right. So the first thing that I want to discuss, and I'm going to be typing everything out today. I'm going to do the best that I can to do minimal writing as possible, but I want to type everything out so that way, if you are watching this as a playback video, you will get to see it clearly, as well as, making sure that you can understand what everything says. And I'm going to actually probably go to 20 font with that. All right, so the first thing I want to cover are the two easiest things to convert. And we actually did this, I believe, on maybe Monday when we talked about percentages. So we are going to convert decimals to percents and percents to decimals first. So we're going to go from decimals All right. So converting decimals to percents. This is going to be super simple, super easy. Okay, so I'm going to make another. Okay, so for example, I am going to start with the easiest numbers of fractions, decimals, and percents, because I think this is something that we can all, definitely identify with, because it's easy to identify. So my decimal is 0.50. And now I'm converting that to a percent, which is going to be 50 and my percent sign. Okay, so my steps are as follows, and it's very easy, very simple. You're going to move the decimal. You're going to move your decimal 2 places to the right. Then you're going to add your percent sign. That's it. Okay. Real simple, real easy. This is just simply moving decimals either to the right or either to the left. But if you are converting a decimal to a percent, these are the rules that you will follow. Okay. And we are also going to be looking into some other numbers as well. But the point is, when you know how to work a rule, you can apply it to any number. And we are going to definitely do that a little later on today. Okay. You want to make sure I put a little space. All right. Okay. So now we're going to do the opposite. I am going to go from converting percents to decimals. So I'm actually going to do the opposite. Instead of me going 2 places to the right, I am going to move my decimal to, I'm going to move 2 places to the left. Okay, so again, the example that I will stick with is the number 50, because 50 is an easy number to remember. So I have 50%, and I move that, and that's equal in a decimal to 0.50. Now, how did I do that? Okay, very easy. Again, very easy, very simple. You're just moving things around. That's all. Okay. So what you're going to do is, your first step is you're going to move your decimal So you're going to move your decimal 2 places to the left, and you're going to drop your percent sign. Now, because 50 is a whole number, remember, whenever you're dealing with a whole number, your decimal is going to be behind the ones place. Okay? So again, when I have 50% here, 50 is a whole number. So again, my decimal is going to be behind the 0 in 50. Now I'm going to move it 2 places over to the left, and I drop my percentage sign. Okay. I'm going to move these up just a little bit so that way we can have room for any other examples that we may come across. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to just throw out some numbers to show you that the rule does not change because the number looks different, or oh my God, I'm dealing with a big number. Remember, it's not about how big the number is. It's about making sure that you understand the rule. Okay, so now this is where I'm going to be writing. So if I wanted to convert If I wanted to convert 17.2 from a decimal to a percent, I'm still going to follow the rule. I am going to move my decimal 2 places over to the right. So here's my decimal, and I'm going to, here's my decimal, and I'm going to move it 2 places over. Now this extra space represents a 0. So now when I've done that, and I'm going to add my percent sign. Okay. So again, this plays a very important part when it comes to your math and maybe your science GED exams, simply because you may have to do some conversions. I know in word problems, they have a lot of word problems where they may start off as a decimal, but your answer may have to be in a percent. So again, making sure that you know how to convert and when to convert certain things, that is very important. Okay, and I'm going to do one more decimal to percent. Okay, so I have 0.003, or if I read this mathematically correct, this is 3 thousandths, because this is my tenths place, my hundredths place, and my 3 is in my thousandths place. So technically this would be called 3 thousandths. So again, I'm just going to move my decimal 2 places over to the right. 1, 2. Okay. So now my answer is 0.3%. So It is okay for you to have a decimal in your percent. You're also going to see that it's okay to have a percent, to have a decimal in other things when we continue to convert. So don't be so caught up on, oh, this looks funny or this doesn't look right. As long as you follow the rules, then everything will be fine. And let me also say this as well. You can add your first zero in front of that if you would like. But it really doesn't matter. It just depends on your preference. And in most cases, some answers may actually look this way. But just know that without the first zero, it's still the same because the decimal is still in its rightful place. And this is actually, and the 3 is actually where it needs to be. So don't get caught up on, do I need my zero here or do I not need a zero? It's really just about your personal preference. Okay. Now, again, we're going to convert percents to decimals. Okay. So this is my percent. And as you can see, it already has a decimal in there, but that doesn't mean that that is the actual correct answer. I still will have to follow my steps and go 2 places over to the left. So when I move my decimal, 1, 2, and I drop my percent sign, I'm going to have 517 thousandths or 0.517. Okay. So again, just because you see a decimal in the answer and they want you to convert it to something, that doesn't mean that that's the correct answer. You still have to make sure that you follow those rules. Okay. Okay. And let me do one more. Now I have 148%. And yes, for the record, it's okay for you to have a percent that's over 100. Okay. So I just want to put that out there as well. Again, because this is a whole number, my decimal is going to be behind the ones place, which is the 8. So what I'm going to do, I'm simply going to follow my rule and move my decimal 2 places over to the left. So my decimal is here. And I go 1, 2. Okay. So my answer is 1.48 or 1 48/100, depending on which way you want to say it. Okay. So as you can see, I've done 2 examples for each, well, technically 3, examples on how to convert decimals to percents and percents to decimals. And remember, if you are watching this as a playback video, you are more than welcome to pause, take your notes, you can rewind or fast forward. That's the beautiful thing about technology, especially when it relates to videos. Okay, so. And again, to my students, if there are any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves and you can ask the question. Just make sure that you put yourselves back on mute so that way we can cancel out any background noise. Okay. All right. So the next 2 that I'm going to discuss, I'm not going to say that they are tricky, but you have to know 2 things. You have to know your place value. Okay, so as it relates to whole numbers versus decimals, you have to know your place value as it relates to that. And you probably have to know how to do some easy division, but we're going to get to that. Okay, so this next one is going to be converting decimals to fractions. Okay. All right. So again, I'm going to use the easy numbers here. Okay. So I have 0.50, and that is going to be equal to 1/2. Okay. Now, of course, we know that because that's just easy for us to remember. But I'm going to go ahead and give you the breakdown of simply how to do this. And this is where knowing your place value comes into play. Okay. All right, here we go. Did not want to cooperate with me this morning. Okay, so step one, this is the first step. You have to determine what place value that you're going to be dealing with, okay? And what I mean by that is when I use 0.50, that's actually 50 hundredths, okay? And I will give you a quick crash course on place value momentarily. Okay, so in the example, a decimal is read as 50 hundredths. I'm going to write that. Is read as 50 hundredths. So because I read it as 50 hundredths, okay. All right, move that up. All right, and I'm going to move this up too. So again, I have 50 hundredths. So my 5 is in my tenths place, and my 0 is in my hundredths place. So when I read this mathematically, it says 50 hundredths. So when I say that, that basically means I am going to write the fraction 50 over 100. Because when I read the decimal again, it says 50 hundredths. So because I'm reading it as such, however I say it, that is how I will write it in a fraction. So 50 hundredths is 50 over 100. Okay. So, and then of course, with any fraction, you must simplify. Okay. So I want to make sure that we put that in here as well. Okay. Now, I do have a sheet that I did type all of this up, and I would give this to my students so that way they can have those steps down packed. If I do find it, I will definitely make sure that I email it to you all, and I'll do the best that I can to leave it in the pinned comment section as well. Okay, let me make this. I'm going to make this a little smaller. Uh-oh. All right. All right. Okay. All right. All right. So now what I want to do is I want to go from fractions to decimals. And then we're going to do a couple of examples at the bottom here. Okay. Now, when you're converting fractions to decimals, there are technically two ways to do this, but I want to show you, I'm going to show you both ways so that way you can decide which way works for you. Okay. So we're going to converting fractions to decimals. Okay. This is where you will have to know your division. So again, if division was one of those subjects in math where you didn't quite understand it, I really strongly advise you to study up on your division, because again, when you get to the higher level math, division and multiplication is really the forefront of all higher math. So it's very important that you understand how to do basic multiplication and basic division. And I'm going to prove that right now. Okay. So I have, and I'm going to use 1/2. I have 1/2 as my fraction, and I am converting it to a decimal, and that is going to give me 0.5. Okay. All right. All right, there we go. All right. So here are the rules for this. Now, again, this is where division is definitely going to come into play. You're going to divide your denominator, which is the bottom number, into your numerator, which is your top number. Okay. Step 2. You will have to add a decimal point rather, and a 0 to the dividend. Now remember, I did a video on Monday as it relates to divisors. I'm sorry, not Monday, Tuesday, because we talked about dividing decimals. I'll be sure to leave that video for division if you need a refresher on dividends, divisors, quotients. I'll be sure to leave it, up there. So that way you can just click onto it if you need a refresher. Okay. Okay. Uh-oh. Okay, so step 3, you're going to divide as normal. Making sure, now this is important, making sure that you align your decimal and your quotient Now I'm going to show you exactly what that looks like. Okay, get rid of that. All right, so now I'm going to do some writing. All right, so I have my fraction. I have 1/2. Remember, 1 is my numerator or my top number. 2 is my denominator or my bottom number. Now, as it relates to divisors and dividends, 2 would be my divisor and 1 would be my dividend. Okay, so when I turn this into a long division problem, I have 2 divided by 1. Now, we know that 2 cannot go into 1 because 2 is greater than 1. So step 2 says I'm going to have to add a decimal point and a 0, okay, to my problem. And I did not like how I wrote that, so I'm sorry. Okay, now that I've done that, I can now divide as normal. So I'm looking at this as 2 divided by 1.0, or I can look at this like 2 divided by 10, which would give me 5. Now this is step 3. Wherever my decimal is in my dividend, I have to make sure that it's in the same place or it's aligned with the decimal in my quotient or my answer. So when I do that, I'm just simply going to divide like I normally do. Okay. And that is it. Okay. So that is how you would do it by hand. Now, as far as a calculator is concerned, you would simply type in your fraction. You would put 1, divide button, 2, enter. Okay. So this is only done by hand. Okay, so this is how you would do it if you were writing it out. But if you were typing this into a calculator, and I'll be sure to type that at the bottom here. Okay. When using a calculator, you will type it in the way, or you would type it, meaning the fraction the way you see it. Okay. So that's very important. So what I've written again, that is how you would write it on hand. Okay. And if you are using the calculator, this is what you would use. Okay. Now, before I move any further, I want to do an example of converting decimals to fractions. Okay. So I'm going to start with 1, and then I will eventually go to a bigger number. Okay. So again, I have 1. Oh. So this is my decimal. My decimal is 0.107. Now I know that's how we would normally say it, but again, you have to know your place value. So this is actually read as 107 thousandths. Again, my 1 is in my tenths place, my 0 is in the hundredths place, and my 7 is in the thousandths place. So because of that, this would be my fraction, 107 over 1,000. Simple. You just have to know your place value. And I'm going to do one more. Let me change this number. All right, there we go. Now, again, we read this as 1.9. But mathematically speaking, we would read this as 1 9/10, because 1 is serving as my whole number and my 9 is in my tenths place. Okay. So that would be my fraction, because I'm reading that as 1 9/10. So again, 1 serves as my whole number and 9 is in my tenths place. So that's the reason why I would have the 10 as my bottom number or my denominator. Okay. So I'm going to try to do one more example over here as it relates to converting your fractions to decimals. Okay. And then after that, I'll have two more examples, and that'll be it for today. And of course, I will be sure to email you all a practice sheet so that way you can practice on conversions and leave it in the pinned comment section as well. All right, so let me pick another quick fraction here. Okay, I will do 2. All right. Yeah, I'll do that one. All right. So I have 2/5, and I need to convert 2/5 into a decimal. Okay. So I'm going to follow my steps. I'm going to divide my denominator into my numerator. I already know 5 cannot go into 2. So therefore, I'm going to add my decimal point and a 0 in my dividend. And then I'm going to divide as normal. That looks like 5 divided by 20, which is 4. And I'm going to make sure that I align my decimal in my quotient with wherever my decimal is in my dividend. And when I do this, and when I solve, 4/10 is my answer. So I have just converted 2/5 to my decimal, which is 0.4 or 4/10. Okay. Okay. And I have two more examples. See, all of this is just simply dealing with basic arithmetic and knowing how to move from left to right. It's as simple and as easy as pie. And I like pie. Okay, so we're going to keep it moving here. All right, and then I'm going to, all right. All right, so now we are going to go to converting fractions to percentages. Now, there's actually two ways to do this. So my apologies for what I said earlier. There are two ways that you can convert your fractions to percentages. One is a very long way. So I'm going to show you the shortcut version, okay? Because the one way you can do this, you can convert your fraction to a decimal and then your decimal to a percent. That's way too much, because remember, you want to use the tips, the tricks, the shortcuts as much as you can on any of your tests that you're taking, because all of your tests are timed. Okay. All right. So now I have my fraction, which is 1/2, and that is converted to 50 cents. 50%, not cent. All right. So I'm going to move that up just a little bit so that way I can have some room. All right. All right. So the steps are as follows as it relates to converting your fractions to percentages. Number one, this deals with multiplication. So you're going to multiply by 100 over 1. Remember, the word percent means for every 100. So when you are converting your fraction to a percent, you are simply just multiplying that fraction by 100 over 1. And step 2, simplify if need be. Now, there is another trick that I want to show you on how you can on how you can convert your fractions to percentages. So this is the bonus. If your denominator is a multiple, now this is the key you got to know, is a multiple of 100, you simply will multiply both numbers by that multiple. And I will show you an example of what I mean. Okay. Now, so I'm going to take 1/2. I'm going to use my example. So I have 1/2. Now, I'm going to follow the first step. So I'm going to say 1/2 multiplied by 100 over 1. And we know how to multiply fractions. We multiply the top two numbers together. We multiply the bottom numbers together. And then we simplify. Oh, and don't forget to add your percent sign. It's very important. Okay, so I'm going to and add your percent sign. Always want to add your percent sign. Now, I am going, oops, move that up. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to follow the bonus step. Now remember, these are two different steps, but I'm still going to come out with the same answer. So I'm going to use red. Do I have is there a question? Hello? Let me see what's happening right here. Very quickly. One second. Okay. Okay. Again, we want to make sure that we are on mute, making sure that we cancel out any background noise. And if there's a question, please feel free to unmute yourselves, but make sure that you put yourselves back on mute. Okay, that's very important. All right. Uh-oh. Whoops. Didn't need that line right there. All right. So now what I'm going to do is, if your denominator is a multiple of 100, 2 is a multiple of 100. Okay? So I am going to say 1/2. What number, if I multiplied it by 2, would give me 100? Well, that's easy. That'll be 50. So I'm going to multiply my bottom number by 50 as well as my top number. And when I do that, I'm going to have 50 over 100. And of course, any number that's over 100 as it relates to a percent. Okay, so you would just do that. Okay, so if you have 2, 4, 5, 10, 2, 4, 5, 10, 20, I'll just go ahead and list them. So if your denominators are the following, then you can multiply by whatever number you can get that will give you 100. Okay, so I'll go ahead and type that in. Two, 4, 5, 10, 20, 25, or 50. Or 50. Okay. Then you can multiply by whatever number will give you 100. Oh, okay. All right. All right. So then we have one more that I would like to go over, and then that will be the end of class. Okay. So now we have, which I think this is the easiest one out of all of them. I'm going to convert okay. So I'm going to convert my percents to fractions, which is really, really simple. Okay. All right. So I had to move my toolbar for a second. All right. So now what I have is this. I have 50%, and that's going to be equal to 1/2. We know this because again, we're just using easy numbers. Okay. Now, the steps are simple. Because remember, we talked about this actually on, I believe, Monday when we talked about percentages, if I'm not mistaken. Percents are simply just any number over 100, right? So all you're going to do is this. Put your number over 100. Step 2, simplify. That's it. That's all you're going to do. Simplify if need be. Remember, with fractions, you always want to make sure that you simplify. You never want to leave a fraction unsimplified. We frown upon that in the math community. Okay. So again, I am going to use the example here. I'll change that back to blue. I am going to have 50, and I'm going to put that over 100. I'm going to simplify that to 1/2. Simple. Another example, and it can be any number. Remember, some fractions may not need to be simplified, so that's how come you have to know your factors, your multiples. You have to know those important things as it relates to multiplication and as well as division. All right, so I'm going to say 37. Okay, so I have 37%, and I need to convert this to a fraction. No big deal. I'm just going to put 37 over 100. That's it. Now I'm going to do one more example, and it's going to deal with a larger number. Now, again, do not be intimidated by how big the numbers are, simply because the rules are still the same. So I'm going to use 119. So I have 119%, and I need to convert this to a fraction. Again, I'm just simply going to put my number, which is 119, over 100. This is what we call an improper fraction. Again, you do not want to leave your fractions improper. In some concepts in math, that's okay. But in this instance, you want to convert your improper fraction to a mixed fraction. Okay. And when I do that, I have 1 and 19 over 100. Okay. So if you need a refresher on how to convert improper fractions to mixed fractions, I believe there is a video in Fundamentals of Math that deals with that. I cannot remember what part it is though, but nonetheless, I will be sure to leave the playlist of Fundamentals of Math at the end of this video. Okay, so this is pretty much what you will need to know as it relates to converting fractions, decimals, and percentages. Real simple. You're just moving things around. You're just making sure that you know when to move to the left, when to move the decimal to the right, making sure that you know when to put something over 100 and when to simplify, when not to simplify. Do I even need to simplify? So if you follow these rules, I guarantee you that your conversions of fractions, decimals, and percents will be très magnifique, be very, very magnificent for you. Okay. So, and I believe on yesterday, I did not stop the screen share. So this time I am going to stop the screen share. Okay. But again, I just want to go back over very quickly. This is how you will convert decimals to percents. Move your decimal 2 places to the right, add your percent sign. Converting percents to decimals, you're going to do the opposite. You're going to move your decimal 2 places to the left and drop your percent sign, because there is a difference between 0.50 and 50%. Total difference. Okay. Converting decimals to fractions, again, making sure that you know your place value. Okay. So in the example, my decimal is read as 50 hundredths. So because I'm reading that as 50 hundredths, I am going to put that number as a fraction. So when I say 50 hundredths, I'm writing it 50 over 100. And of course, I'm going to simplify that to 1/2. Okay. And of course, we have the examples down here for you of how we did that. Okay. And then I have converting fractions to decimals. Now, again, if you're doing this by hand, these are the 3 steps that you would have to do, and making sure that you are following those steps precisely if you're doing it by hand. However, if you're using a calculator, you will simply punch in the numbers or enter the numbers in as you see it. So for example, 1/2, that's a fraction, which is simply a division problem. So I'm going to put in my calculator, hit the 1, the divide button, 2, and then enter, and it should give me 0.5. Okay, that's going to be very important. So this is the handwritten way, steps 1 through 3. When you're using a calculator, you will type the fraction in the way you see it, making sure again that you hit the division button, because that represents the fraction button as well. All right, and converting fractions to percentages. I have 1/2 equals 50 cents. I'm simply going to multiply my fraction by 100 over 1 and simplify if need be and add my percent sign. Now, I wrote at the bottom here, if your denominator has any of these numbers, they are multiples of 2. So that means you can multiply whatever number that would give you 100. Okay. And I'm not quite sure. I think I heard a ding, so I don't know if that's someone joining us. But nonetheless, good morning if you're just joining us. Okay. Now, we have one more, converting percentages to fractions. Simply, you're going to put your number over 100 and you're going to simplify your fraction. That's all you're going to do. So that was just a quick recap of how to convert fractions, decimals, and percentages. I will be sure to upload this video as soon as possible, so that way you all can have a a fresh eye at looking at it and making sure that you understand how the steps work. And I will accompany that with a worksheet for you. Okay. So now I'm going to stop. Are there, good morning, Jeremiah.
I'm finally here.
Oh, okay. Go ahead and go ahead and put yourself, um, go ahead and put yourself, you can take yourself off the camera. So hit the camera button. Okay. We want to make sure that we, cover your face.
I don't know how to do that.
Okay.
Am I off?
No, no, you're not. Okay. I'm going to put you on mute, Jeremiah. Okay. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to upload this video and make sure that you all rewatch the video and make sure that you follow the directions to a T. The directions are there to help you. They are easy peasy lemon squeezy. Okay. And if you have any questions at all, please email me, contact me, let me know. But I'm going to go ahead and upload this video so you can go ahead and rewatch it and take your notes. And then that way you can have something to work along with your practice sheet. Okay. So again, thank you all so much for joining me this morning. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. Okay. Um, so with all of that being said, are there any questions? Okay. Well, as I always say, no news is good news to me. So, with that being said, I'm going to make sure that I leave the videos for fractions and the fundamental math playlist over here. And I'll make sure to leave any other extra supplemental things that you need in the pinned comment section. Okay. So, again, thank you all so much for joining me. Miss Hampton loves you. There's absolutely nothing you can do about it. And until tomorrow, see y'all tomorrow. Have a blessed and wonderful Wednesday.